Should the government regulate or break up big technology companies? Well, these are urgent questions on Capitol Hill as data breaches and cybersecurity threats increase. One congressman who represents big tech in Washington believes breaking up the companies is not the answer. So what is? Take a look.
Congressman Khanna assumed office in 2017 and considers himself a progressive capitalist. While his district includes wealthy technology moguls of Silicon Valley, Khanna is passionate about spreading high-paying tech jobs to rural America.
No one should have to leave their hometown just to get a job of the 21st century.
He also believes the government should enforce some tech regulations while ensuring America stays competitive. And Khanna introduced bipartisan legislation to protect Americans against growing cybersecurity threats.
Well, Congressman Khanna joins us now from Capitol Hill. And Congressman, it's an honor to have you on. Thanks for being with us.
It's my honor to be on the show.
Let's talk about this whole technology thing. I've been waiting for Congress to do something similar to what the EU did to try to regulate the data that's collected. And I'm frankly disappointed there hadn't been more action. And recently you had Zuckerberg testifying and, of all things, asked him of how to protect data. It's kind of like the farmer asking the fox how to protect the chickens. Where do we stand on that? Why aren't we seeing more movement to protect privacy, to protect data?
Well, I share your frustration, and here's the irony. All of the technology has been invented in the United States, and yet it's Europe that is making the regulations when they haven't done any of the innovation. The United States Congress should be leading, and we can do a few simple things. First, we need an Internet Bill of Rights. You should own your data. Someone should have to get your consent before they collect the data or transfer the data. And frankly, they should have to compensate you for the use of that data, which could be a few $100s every year that people would get compensated by Facebook or other social media companies. And second, we need regulation about what should be done with this data. It has to be anonymized before people can be targeted. It shouldn't be exploited by being given to data brokers. So there's a lot of smart regulation we need.
Well, I've read through your Internet Bill of Rights, at least what's been published online. Where does that stand? Is that ever going to come into some kind of legislation?
It should. It's stuck right now, frankly, in the Energy and Commerce Committee, but it should be bipartisan. The problem is that there are too many special interests, both the internet service providers and some of the tech lobbyists, that are resisting the implementation of it. And they rely, frankly, on the lack of expertise about technology in Congress. So they use jargon to confuse people. But we are hoping to get it done by the end of next year. I've been frustrated at how slow the progress has been.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, one of the things you highlight in the Bill of Rights is an absolute right for access. And I think a lot of people don't understand that their access to the internet can actually be throttled, and then the access of information from a full universe of information providers can actually be throttled. And so you can literally create an echo chamber for a user that they're only going to get the most popular or the companies that actually can spend for the access. How should that change, and how do we get that regulated?
Well, we need to make sure that the internet is open to all people and viewpoints, not just dominated either by the large companies that can afford to flood the market or the popular opinions, and where you have dissenting opinions squelched or throttled. And so if you had Congress to adopt a principle that you could not throttle or suppress any viewpoint on the internet, that would create a framework where everyone can participate.
What would you advise people to do now in this sort of the interim? I personally am a big fan of DuckDuckGo, which doesn't track you, and then I use the Brave browser, which has protections that if you don't want to be tracked, you're not going to be tracked. What should the average person be looking at?
Those are good suggestions. Mozilla is another browser that doesn't track or save your data. But I think people just need to be very careful. They need to know that when they're entering things on Facebook or entering things onto Google search, that a lot of that data is being collected. Now, there are options in Facebook and Google to have that data deleted, but most people don't know about that. And I would recommend that they take 15 minutes to look at how they can delete that data and do that at least once every 6 months or once a year, so their data isn't out there without their knowledge.
What about at the ISP level? Because the ISPs are also collecting data on you. There's very little control that you have over that. And they're also monetizing that data and selling your information to data banks. What about that? Because the user can't control that.
Yeah, and that's much harder to control, and that's why we need regulation. And in a lot of these cases, they can't even argue that they're trying to get you better service. I mean, in the case of Google, sometimes they argue, okay, they need some data so they can get Google Maps to work and figure out where you're located. But in the case of AT&T or Verizon, they're taking your information as a condition of providing you service, and then they're selling this to data brokers, and they're using your data to target ads or to sell products to you. And it's both uncompetitive because companies that have large data outcompete small businesses, and this is one of the pressures that's being put on small retailers and driving them out of business. And it's also unfair to consumers whose data is being used without compensation. There's not much, frankly, a consumer can do. We need Congress to regulate it and say you can't take that data without compensation and consent.
How do we get this thing through? It seems like it's kind of hopeless to get any kind of bipartisan effort going in Congress and the Senate today. How can we get this thing through?
Well, this is an area I think we should be bipartisan. One, we want to lead in technology over China. I mean, China has become basically a surveillance state to what they're doing with the Uyghurs in terms of using technology to monitor them, and then forced organ sales is awful. America needs to provide an alternative model for technology that says in our nation, we believe in individual liberty, we believe in freedom, we believe in human dignity, and we're going to make sure our constitutional values are enshrined in our technology. And the second thing is we need to make sure that every American around this country has access to those new technology jobs. I mean, we're competing with 1.2 billion people in China. We're not going to win if we write off communities or we don't have a person to waste. So I think on American leadership in the technology era, there should be bipartisanship, and we could fight about other things.
All right. Well, I've got to ask this. You call yourself a capitalist, and what you just said was definitely coming from a capitalist point of view. Let's create more jobs right here in America. At the same time, you're the chair of Bernie Sanders, who's frankly known for being a socialist. How do you reconcile the two viewpoints?
Well, I call myself a progressive capitalist. I represent Silicon Valley, and we've created, as you know, trillions of dollars of wealth in the United States. And it's a great thing that entrepreneurship, innovation is in the United States, because our values, in my belief, of freedom and of human dignity are important. So I want America to lead. I think where I agree with Bernie Sanders is that everyone should have education, everyone should have health care. As we're moving to a knowledge economy, we need to invest in our people to give them health care and education so that they can succeed in the market and become entrepreneurs, and that's why I support him. I also believe that we shouldn't be engaged in a lot of overseas wars. China hasn't been in a war since 1979. We've been in 40 conflicts since then. I'd rather we invest in our people, in our communities, in our country, instead of engaging in these overseas wars.
All right. Well, Congressman, thanks for being with us, and stay strong on this Internet Bill of Rights. I think we need something to really start regulating, at least at the ISP level, because consumers really don't have any control over that one. That's one that's crying out. So thank you for that effort.
Thank you, and hope you have a nice holiday, and Merry Christmas in advance.
Merry Christmas to you.